Welcome back to Mighty Habits, everyone. I'm Steven,
And I'm Mary,
and we are so excited to be taking a deep dive today.
into a book that's sure to spark some lively debate
We're diving into God is Not Great.
by Christopher Hitchens.
Oh, no.
Before you hit that skip button.
This isn't about telling anyone what to believe.
It's more like a mental workout.
Yeah, a chance to wrestle with some really big ideas.
And maybe challenge some assumptions along the way.
Exactly.
Ready to jump in, Stephen?
Absolutely. Mary, give us the lowdown.
What's the core argument Hitchens is making in God is Not Great?
Yeah, what's the big takeaway here?
Well,
In a nutshell.
Hitchens argues that religion is not only unnecessary,
Go.
but actually harmful to humanity.
Wow, he doesn't hold back, does he?
Not one bit.
I'm sure some folks listening are thinking,
Hold on a second.
how can he say that?
Right.
So, Mary, break it down for us. What evidence does Hitchens use?
Oh, he goes deep, Stephen.
Okay.
Combining historical analysis with this razor-sharp logic and even a dash of his trademark dark humor
Oh, I love that.
to dissect religious doctrines and their impact.
So it sounds like he's going beyond just critiquing specific religions, right?
But absolutely.
He's taking aim at the whole concept.
Of organized faith itself.
Interesting. So one of his most impactful arguments, Mary, is this idea.
Oh, yes, this idea that religion poisons everything.
Poisons everything.
It's a powerful statement.
That's a heavy accusation. What does he mean by that?
He argues that it's been a driving force behind so much conflict, division, and oppression throughout history.
Whoa, okay.
Like religious wars, the persecution of minorities, the
Right.
suppression of scientific inquiry.
You know, it's
It makes you think, doesn't it?
it really does.
About those late night debates.
Oh, yeah.
Questioning, the meaning of life.
Yeah.
Whether there's something more out there.
Have you ever wrestled with those big questions?
All the time, Stephen.
Yeah.
And Hitchens doesn't shy away from the inconsistencies.
In religious texts.
Exactly. He digs into those conflicting interpretations, the historical inaccuracies, some of the more outlandish claims.
He's really pushing us to take a closer look.
A much closer look.
Sometimes that closer look can lead to some...
uncomfortable realizations.
Absolutely. Hitchens challenges us to confront those truths.
To examine the potential harms of blind faith.
It's a bold approach.
It is.
He's not pulling any punches. But I've heard
Yes.
that even when tackling these serious topics,
Yes.
Hitchens injects his signature wit.
Oh, absolutely.
He's a master of language.
He uses that wit to highlight the absurdity of some beliefs.
Can you give us an example?
Let me see. Well, he once said,
Okay.
and I'm paraphrasing here,
Sure.
the idea that a supreme being would care about our little planet is ludicrous. It's like believing Shakespeare would be interested in the opinions of a particularly clever earthworm.
Oh, man, classic Hitchens.
Right.
Even when dissecting these serious subjects, he makes you chuckle.
You can't help but smile.
It's that blend of intellect and wit that makes him so engaging.
Absolutely.
You know, Mary, I wonder what our listeners are thinking right now.
Me too.
This book definitely pushes us.
Out of our comfort zones.
But isn't that the whole point?
Yes.
To shake things up, see the world from a fresh perspective.
Exactly.
It's not about agreeing with every single point.
It's about engaging with the ideas.
Right.
Analyzing the arguments.
And then forming your own conclusions.
Precisely. It's like he's asking us, what if religion isn't the answer?
Yeah, what are the alternatives?
Where do we find meaning, morality?
In a world without a divine figure.
That's a good question.
We'll be digging into those questions even further as we continue our deep dive.
Into God is Not Great.
This is a book for anyone who has ever questioned or doubted or just wondered.
About the role of religion
In their lives.
and society.
It's a thought-provoking journey.
You won't want to miss it.
And if you're enjoying this deep dive,
Please subscribe to Mighty Habits.
for more thought-provoking conversations.
We'll be right back
After a short break.
with more on God is Not Great.
See you soon.
One thing that really struck me, Stephen, while preparing for this depth dive,
Yeah.
was how closely Hitchens examines religious texts.
He does, doesn't he?
He doesn't just dismiss them.
Right.
He really digs in to
Yeah.
the inconsistencies, the
Yeah.
contradictions within them.
It's like he's taking the texts seriously.
Oh, absolutely.
On their own terms.
Right.
And seeing where that leads.
And often to some pretty challenging conclusions.
For sure.
He dissects stories, analyzes interpretations,
Right.
points out these discrepancies that can come up when you try to reconcile faith with logic and reason.
It makes you think, doesn't it?
It really does.
Can you give us a specific example
Oh, sure.
of how Hitchens approaches this textual analysis?
Well, one that comes to mind is his examination of divine intervention.
Okay.
The idea that God actively intervenes in human affairs, answers prayers, performs miracles, guides the course of history.
Yeah, it's a common theme.
But Hitchens asks,
Okay.
if God is truly all-powerful and all-loving, why is there so much suffering?
So much injustice
In the world.
That's the age-old question, isn't it?
It is.
Reconciling a benevolent God
Right.
with the realities of human experience.
That's a real dilemma.
And Hitchens uses this,
To make a broader point,
which is...
the idea of a divine plan
Right.
often falls apart when you look at the complexities of life.
You know, I've heard some people say Hitchens is too harsh,
Okay.
too dismissive of religion.
I can see that.
But I think it's important to remember,
What's that?
he's not just trying to tear things down.
He's advocating for something.
Yeah, what is that something?
He's a champion for critical thinking.
Right.
For demanding evidence.
Yeah.
For being skeptical of claims that lack rational justification.
He wants us to think for ourselves.
Exactly.
So it's more about the process
an inquiry
than arriving at a specific conclusion.
It's a shift in mindset.
Okay.
Away from blind acceptance.
And toward...
a more reasoned, evidence-based way of seeing the world.
I know Hitchens criticized all religions,
He did.
but he seemed to really focus on fundamentalism.
He saw it as particularly dangerous.
Why is that?
Because of its rigid adherence to literal interpretations of Scripture, which often leads to rejecting modernity, science, even basic human rights.
So he's saying fundamentalism kind of takes the potential harms.
It magnifies them.
Yeah, it takes them to an extreme.
Precisely.
It's hard to ignore those concerns, Mary.
I agree.
Especially when you look at what's happening in the world today.
Absolutely.
We see the consequences of religious extremism.
All around us.
It makes you wonder if Hitchens wasn't onto something.
It does give you power.
It makes you think about the role of religion in society.
And the potential for harm.
When faith is used to justify violence, discrimination, or control.
Those are serious issues.
We've talked a lot about the negative side of religion.
We have.
But we should acknowledge
Of course.
that religious institutions
And individuals.
have done a lot of good too.
I agree.
We can't paint everything with a single brushstroke.
There's a nuance to this issue.
Yeah, a complexity.
Absolutely.
But I think Hitchens was mainly concerned
Yes.
with the potential for harm,
Right.
especially when religion is used to justify things
Okay.
that violate basic human values.
I think that's a fair assessment.
And he believed that potential for harm was kind of baked in
to the very structure
of religious belief.
This idea that absolute truth and divine authority
Stifle critical thinking.
lead to intolerance.
It's a dangerous combination.
It can be.
But, you know,
Yeah.
Hitchens was also known for his wit,
Oh, absolutely.
finding humor even in the midst of these heavy topics.
He could be devastating in his critiques.
Oh, yeah.
But there was this playful intelligence.
Yeah, like a twinkle in his eye.
It made his writing so captivating.
It's that mix of intellect and wit.
That made him so compelling.
He wasn't just being provocative.
Right.
He was crafting arguments, backing them up,
With evidence.
and doing it all with his unique style.
His style was all his own.
You know, one of the things that struck me about Hitchens' work
Yeah.
was his commitment to humanism.
He was deeply concerned with human values.
Despite his critiques of religion,
Morality, justice.
creating a better world,
Those were his passions.
it'd be easy to see him.
As just rejecting all values.
Yeah, but he wasn't.
He was arguing for a different foundation for morality.
One rooted in reason
In empathy.
and a shared understanding of human needs.
In aspirations.
He believed we don't need divine authority.
To tell us how to live moral lives.
He thought humans have the capacity
For reason.
for developing ethical systems that promote well-being.
So it's about finding meaning and purpose.
In a world without God.
Creating a moral compass based on human values.
And that's a powerful idea, Mary.
It is.
But I'm sure some folks listening are thinking,
What are they thinking?
okay, but what about comfort?
Comfort.
Community.
Community.
A framework for dealing with life's big questions.
What about them?
What's the alternative?
That's a valid point.
Yeah.
Hitchens wouldn't deny those benefits,
Glad.
but he'd argue they come at a cost.
What kind of cost?
A cost in terms of critical thinking,
Okay.
intellectual honesty,
Right.
and sometimes even basic human rights.
So it's about weighing those benefits against the potential downsides.
Exactly.
Not just accepting things because they're comfortable
Right.
or provide a sense of belonging.
It's about thinking critically.
And recognizing that there are other sources of meaning.
Other sources of purpose.
We can find community through shared values.
Yes.
Find solace in art and nature.
Absolutely.
Find guidance in philosophical and ethical traditions.
That don't rely on the supernatural.
It's not about replacing religion with something exactly the same.
It's not.
It's about being open to exploring different paths.
Different ways of understanding.
Our place in the universe.
And finding meaning.
In a world without God.
Precisely.
And that exploration.
That questioning.
That seeking.
That's what Hitchens was all about.
He was a fierce advocate for intellectual freedom.
For challenging the status quo.
For never settling for easy answers.
He never did.
I think this is a great place to pause.
Catch our breath.
We've explored some complex ideas today.
We have.
Hopefully spark some thoughts.
In our listeners' minds.
But there's still more to unpack.
More to discuss.
And God is not great.
So much more.
Join us again as we continue our deep dive
into Christopher Hitchens'
thought-provoking work.
You know, as we wrap up our deep dive into God is not great,
Yeah.
I keep thinking about Hitchens' emphasis on the human capacity for good.
Yeah.
Even without a divine blueprint.
It's easy to come away from this book
thinking Hitchens is just a cynic.
Right.
Tearing everything down. But he's trying to build something too, right?
Absolutely.
What is he trying to build?
He really believes in human empathy.
Okay.
Our ability to see suffering and respond.
Right.
And he sees that
Yeah.
as the foundation for a just and ethical society.
Not blind obedience.
Not at all.
Okay. But how do we navigate morality then, if we're not relying on religious commandments?
Well, Hitchens would say we have an innate moral compass.
Really?
We can figure out right from wrong through reason, observation,
right,
our shared experiences.
Interesting.
He points to secular ethical systems, philosophical traditions, even our evolutionary development.
So morality isn't dependent on belief.
Not according to Hitchens.
So we use our brains.
Yes.
Look at the consequences and try to build a better society.
For everyone.
It sounds good in theory.
It does.
But some people might say,
yeah,
but religion gives me comfort. It gives me a community.
It helps me deal with life's big questions.
Right.
What's the alternative to all that?
Hitchens wouldn't deny that religion offers those things, but they come at a price.
A price.
Intellectual honesty, critical thinking, sometimes even basic human rights.
So there's a trade-off.
There is.
You have to weigh the good and the bad.
You have to.
It's not about pretending the good stuff isn't there.
Right.
It's about making an informed choice.
Exactly.
And recognizing there are other ways to find meaning.
Other sources of purpose.
Community through shared values.
Yes.
Solace in art and nature.
Absolutely.
Guidance in philosophical traditions.
That don't rely on faith.
It's not about swapping one dogma for another.
Not at all.
It's about being open.
To different paths.
Different ways of understanding the universe.
And finding your own meaning.
In a world without God.
Precisely.
That's what Hitchens was all about.
Questioning everything.
Never settling.
For easy answers.
As we wrap up.
Our deep dive.
I'm struck by Hitchens' legacy.
He was a controversial figure.
Oh, no doubt.
But influential.
Incredibly so.
He sparked so many debates.
Challenged the way people think.
Left his mark on intellectual discourse.
He was a force to be reckoned with.
He was.
And whether you agree with him or not,
right,
his work shows the power of critical thinking.
Questioning everything.
Engaging in debate.
It's so important.
God is Not Great is a book that will challenge you.
Provoke you.
Maybe even make you a little uncomfortable.
It might.
But it will make you think.
Deeply.
Question your assumptions.
Explore new ideas.
And isn't that what intellectual growth is all about?
It's the heart of it.
If you're looking for a book that will shake things up.
Make you curious.
Maybe even change how you see the world.
It just might.
I highly recommend God is Not Great.
It's a journey.
And if you enjoyed this deep dive,
don't forget to subscribe
to Mighty Habits
for more thought-provoking conversations
and explorations of the ideas that shape our world.
We'll see you next time.
Until then, keep those minds curious.
And those habits mighty.